What is art?
Art is
history.
What is art? That's a good question.
This is Art Uncovered.
Art is our collective cultural history.
A weekly podcast that brings you interviews with an eclectic mix of artists and creators.
Art is
disappointing your parents.
I'm your host, Kimberly.
We do it because we are romantic about the book, and at least for someone like me, I really love that the book is a truly collaborative experience with the viewer, and specifically it's an experience where a viewer is in control. The other side of making books and liking books is we also have this kind of blessing and curse that we make commodities. We make an object that there is already a decided industry for, that there is a market for. And so because of that, I think that publishers need to think about economics and money as part of the medium in a way that I think a lot of other art doesn't have to.
Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in. That was the voice of my guest this week, Zach Clark, who's an artist, educator, and founder of National Monument Press, a publishing house that focuses on small edition artist books, zines, and printed matter. Over the course of the conversation, we spoke about Zach's process of printing and distributing artist books, the aesthetic of risoprints, and his current project of printing 12 photo books in collaboration with other artists. Stay with us. Welcome back, listeners. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's episode of Art Uncovered. This week, I am so honored to be here with Zach Clark. Zach, thanks so much for joining us. It's wonderful to connect with you.
I am so excited to be here.
So Zach, you have a lot of things going on. You're an artist, you're an educator, you're a publisher. But to start, I'd love to talk about your press, National Monument Press. So this press is quite different than the corporate presses that we know about, the Simon & Schuster and Penguin Random House and things like this. So to start, I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit about National Monument Press.
Yeah, so National Monument Press is a artist publishing project. I publish work that is vaguely about the American experience, which is both a very broad and elastic concept, but also still within that rubber band, it still gives me a set of confines that I can focus on. The work is, I kind of describe it as about 1/3 my work and about 2/3 work that I publish in collaboration with other artists. That could mean anything from work that an artist brings to me of an idea they have for something that they want to turn to a book. And the very rare occasions, and this really mostly only happens with illustrators that I work with, they basically send me a fully finished thing that I just print. But for the most part, most of the books that I publish are very collaborative in nature because most of the people I'm working with don't work within print and especially don't work within books.
Interesting.
And so just by that nature, a lot of the process of translating a performance artist's work into a book is going to have to be a really collaborative project.
Yeah. Okay, I'm actually really excited. My assumption was that the artists that you chose had some experience in print. So I'm curious if we could maybe use the performance artist as an example. So how did that collaboration, what happened in that collaboration?
Yeah, so that's actually one of it started as a book with an artist named Angela Willits, who is an artist that I went to grad school with, and she makes these performance videos that are they have a lot to do with movement and space and tactility. And she had this show that was at a space out here in San Francisco called Fort Mason, which is now a big arts complex, but was, when it was built, as the name suggests, it was a military base during World War II. And so she had this show that was about essentially decoupling from her long-term partner and parent of her child, and it was all based around this poem that she wrote using maritime flag language. And so there were a couple of videos where she was raising flags to try to communicate that with the subject of, or the other person in her pieces. But there wasn't anywhere that poem existed anywhere. And so she was interested in having some sort of physical thing that could exist for the show, after the show. And so
Is this one on the website by any chance?
it is, yeah.
Okay,
It
let
is
me do
actually...
let me do a screen share so we could take a look at it. Okay, can you see my screen?
Oh yeah, so it'll be on National Monument Press. I
Yeah.
also just chatted you the actual book link.
Oh, perfect. Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
So
so
was she responsible for these graphics?
yeah, so she sent these files that included watercolor drawings and then also these digital elements. And so each of these illustrations is a representation of the flags that would make up the statements that are existing next to it.
So smart. So how many of those did you publish?
I think it was an edition of 100. Yeah, edition of
Okay.
100.
Okay, so your press is largely small editions.
Yeah, so everything I publish is between 100 to 400.
Okay.
I'd say most of what I'm publishing is around 250 copies,
Okay.
um, give or take, depending on the exact project. So.
And I'm curious for like distribution purposes, because they're small edition, do you have to charge more in order to, make up the cost?
So most of what I sell is somewhere between 15 to
Oh my
45.
gosh, that's so
Yeah,
doable.
it's actually part of the benefit of Rezo is that Rezo is a super if you own the machines,
Yeah.
a super cheap way to print.
Okay.
And so that's part of why
That's amazing.
in a lot of art publishing right now, Rezo has become so ubiquitous for small publishers
I'm
because
actually going to do a screen share of this machine. So if I search like was it risograph printing?
yeah.
Okay, let's see what or printer maybe. Oh, it looks
Yep.
like just a regular printer.
Yep, it looks oh yeah, so it's not those first two things. I don't know what that's about.
Okay, yeah, that looks like
Um,
just an Epson desktop printer. Okay, so what about like these ones that I'm seeing here?
yeah. So it looks just like a photocopier, except as you can see with like those images down here. Oh,
Uh-huh.
oh,
Oh, loading. Sorry.
oh no, it's okay. Being on the page with all of those images would be probably better.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, so if you scroll down like that neighborhood press, that first one with the
Yep.
person who's in the apron, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that is a really good example of so Rezo looks like a photocopier, but there are these color specific drums that come in and out. So everything is spot color. One of the things that makes Rezo kind of funny and interesting is that for the most part, most people who are doing Rezo publishing are working on secondhand machines that came from schools, churches,
Oh,
government
wow.
buildings.
So this is an old technology.
Well, no. So you can buy brand new ones. Like we have a brand new one, and so
Okay.
it's just that most people are using secondhand ones because they're dramatically cheaper. It's like a used
Mm,
car where it
mm,
becomes a quarter of its cost once it's been in a school for a year.
okay.
Uh, and so like a new machine costs somewhere between 5 to 15 grand. Um,
Mm,
you can find used ones for a few $100.
okay.
Um, where it gets complicated is those drums. Those are color specific, and changing the color of those drums is a very messy and kind of
Mm,
wasteful task. And
mm,
so
mm.
you only have as many colors as you have drums, and those drums are actually what starts to get pretty expensive.
I see. How often do you have to change them?
So the drums are color specific. So it's the type of thing where if I want to print in CMYK, you can't print in CMYK. That's another reset problem. If I want to print in blue, yellow, and red, I have to have a blue drum, a red drum, a yellow drum.
Sure. Okay.
And so when I print the blue, I put the blue drum in, it prints all the blue. I take that
Oh.
out, I put the red drum in, it prints all the red. Um,
So it's like in layers.
yes, yeah, it's all layer based. It's all spot color, so it's all one color at a time. Just
Very
like
cool.
relief or offset printing.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it's like screen printing almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why the easiest way to think about it is a photocopier that can screen print, which is somewhat accurate.
Very
Uh,
cool.
yeah, but then where it starts to get, and what I really love about Rezo is that because those drums, like you can't have every drum in the world. And so most shops are going to have somewhere between 4 to 10 drums. My studio, Shoot Studio with Amy Burrick, we have 3 different models of machines, so we have like 27 drums between us, and so we have
Wow, that's
it's a
amazing.
problem. But even then, when on our machine that we do most of our like photo-based work, we have 2 versions of yellow, 1 blue, 2 potential versions of magenta. And all of the ink is proprietary. You can only buy ink from Riso, so there's about 75 colors you can use. Which,
Wow.
as I kind of alluded to earlier, there isn't cyan, there isn't magenta. So because of scarcity of drums and the fact that you have to make choices on what your color spectrum is going to be, every studio is going to have a slightly different approach to how they make images. And so something like here in the Bay Area, where there are 15 of us who do Riso printing,
Oh, wow. That's a
if
lot for a
we
small area.
oh yeah, we have a ton of this is one of the biggest kind of Riso centers in the country, I think.
Wow.
And if all 12 of us printed the same image, it
Would
would
look
all
different.
look different
Very
because we
cool.
all have slightly different color setups, or we have
Very
slightly
cool.
different machines.
Very cool.
That's the thing I really love about it.
How realistic could the photos be? Could it be as though it was printed on like a inkjet printer?
That's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. If you are on my website
Yeah,
and
let's do
go
it.
to a book like Brilliant Silence.
Got it.
Yeah, so don't that video might not load properly. So if you scroll down, you have photos.
Great.
Yeah, so if you're good at creating your separations or creating your color profiling, you can get the images pretty darn close with whatever colors you have, but there is always going to be a little bit of a push or a pull directions. There are a couple of people who are doing really, really, really meticulous photography work. Someone like Travis Schaefer from There Now. He's kind of the photo Riso person. And in general, because of that kind of compensating you have to do or relieving yourself of expectations, there isn't a lot of photography work that people do within Riso because it's also just the nature of everything being one color at a time. It gets kind of messy. You have to really, honestly, you have to own the machine and have the space to print slowly and really have your machine dialed in to do photo work well, in my opinion. Because it's all oil-based ink, so it also takes a really long time to dry. There's also Riso is so stupid. The feed tire for these prints runs through the middle of the piece of paper. So when you do a 4-color print, you have put a wet piece of paper through there 4 times, and every time this feed tire runs through the middle of your wet print. Yeah, so I mean, so one of the other like funny and dumb things about Riso is that there are more and more of us using it for art publishing, but like I mentioned, it's for schools, it's for churches, it's for government buildings. Like it is a thing that it is meant to make thousands of spot color options or spot color prints. Like the example I usually give is you're in a small town that has a print shop that the local high school has a red logo. This copy shop
Roger
can
that.
print all of their envelopes with their red logo in a red spot color and not have to use all
Any other
16
colors?
colors in their
Yeah.
inkjet that, don't make sense.
Got it.
And so we are all very much using this machine in a way that it was not designed for, it was not intended for, but designers and artists have kind of figured out how to make it work.
Yeah. So I have a bunch of follow-up questions here. So I guess my first one is, so how did you get into this? If you're using it the wrong way, were you trained to use this in the manner that you are using it?
So on the training front, that's actually kind of also a funny thing about Riso. And part of what I really love about the Riso community is that most people are not coming to Riso from arts backgrounds. It's a lot of people that are working in design. I mean, it really, zines and comics are who was using Riso the most 20-ish years ago. It's really in the
Okay.
last 10 years, it's become more of a broader thing. And so, not until honestly the last 5 years were Rezos in schools, and even still, they're not in a lot of schools. A lot of printmaking departments are like actively against Rezo.
Hmm.
So yeah, so you're getting people that like one of the best Rezo printers in the country, like actually works in like cable access television. Like
Wow.
like that's his background. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so it's a really funny sort of DIY. It's very punk rock. Like part of
Right on, yeah.
to bring us back to why I do Rezo.
Yeah, yeah.
It reminds me, so my past life, I was in a band on tour, and
Cool.
the community that is within art publishing, especially Rezo publishing, has a very similar type of generative community that exists in those same sort of music and DIY spaces. Also, the economics of it all, and the fact that most of our distribution comes through traveling for book fairs. It's not that different
Ah.
from being on tour and then sitting behind a merch table. Um,
Oh.
so yeah, but then as for actually like how I found myself in Rezo, I was doing a lot of screen printing of my photographs in grad school, and that was getting me part of the way of where I wanted to get. And then because I shoot most of my work on film with a Holga, which is this like really crappy plastic
Yeah,
camera.
yeah. With a lot of light
Um,
leaks and things like this.
yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
shoot everything on a 35 millimeter Holga, and those
Okay.
actually are like slightly better cameras that don't have the
Okay.
light leaks, but they still are like very soft focus, and
Yeah.
you get multiple exposures because of how you wind it and such. And so I was getting images that weren't really like traditionally good photos.
Mm.
And then just kind of through trial and error, I printed with now my studio mate, Amy. I had done a couple things with her because she had a Rezo a few years before me. I had a Rezo studio here in the Bay, Culpa Press, print a book for me in grad school, and realized that that Rezo was actually helping me make exactly the images I wanted to.
Oh, so cool.
Years ago now, you could still get Rezos really cheap, and so I happened to stumble on upon one for very, very cheap, right out of grad school. And
Yeah.
so then it's just kind of snowball there with Amy that we've continued to buy stuff. And
Mhm.
now we're a whole massive publishing studio. So yeah.
So if there are any, I guess I was gonna say print-based artists, but apparently you work with all kinds of artists. Like how, do you accept like unsolicited pitches or like how, yeah, if there are any listeners out there who would want to get in touch with you about the possibility of publishing, is that kosher?
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in hearing people's pitches.
Hmm.
I will admit that I don't know if I have yet actually made a book with somebody that was more of that was that kind of giving me a pitch. I think
Mm,
partly
mm,
because since it is such a collaborative project to get someone's idea to the finished project,
sure.
one, it takes a lot longer than most people are um, kind of prepared for.
How
And it just also
long-ish?
needs to I would say most books take at least a year.
Wow, wow, wow.
And I would say that several books I make, like original conversation to publishing, can sometimes take 2 years
Wow,
just because
wow.
they
What a
kind of
special
need
process.
to be a thing. And often what we originally thought the book was going to be is not remotely what it ends up.
Hmm.
That said, I do a lot of contract printing for artists. And so a lot of times, if an artist has a project that like they know what it is, it's all put together. I print books for people all the time.
Oh,
So
cool,
yeah, so
cool,
that's part
cool.
of what Shoot Studio, that's where we do all of the printing, both within our publishing and also our printing for other people.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's great. Do you do the binding and everything also, or
Mhm.
is it
Yeah, so
okay?
we do everything in-house. And that's another thing about Rezo publishing that I really enjoy is that the general ethos of most people who are doing Rezo printing, since it is like such a terrible way to make things, they also tend to be the same people that want to touch every single aspect of the process. And
Mm,
so, yeah, so we
mhm.
do all the binding, all the chopping,
Very cool.
all the distributing. I mean, we have like we've got a machine that does our collating now, and we have like a machine that does our stapling in the booklet maker.
Yeah,
But
very cool.
yeah,
Tools are awesome.
yeah, we have a lot of really. very
Yeah.
cool niche tools.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything else? So we spoke about distribution. So most of well maybe we should clarify. So you said that you attend these book fairs and you sell a lot of books through book fairs. How else do you get these out into the public?
Yeah, so book fairs are the main
Mhm.
outlet besides online sales.
Okay.
That's I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is being sold online.
That's great. Yeah,
I've
listeners, I'll
I
include links because some of these books look awesome and they're affordable, which yeah, thank you
Thank you.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah, so most of the work is either sold online through my web store or through fairs. I'm not in a ton of stores, partly because of, yeah, there's only a few hundred copies. They're not very expensive. And the way that distribution and, consignment or wholesale works, if a book's only 15 bucks, I need to make more than $7 off of that book.
Right. Ah, I
Um,
see, I see, I see, I see.
Especially because I am also of the belief that sure, a lot of us who make books are we do it because we are romantic about the book. And at least for
Mhm.
someone like me, I really love that the book is a truly collaborative experience with the viewer. And specifically, it's an experience where a viewer is in control. And so a lot of the books that I put out are really kind of sad and really with a lot of heavy topics.
Mm,
And with
mm.
a book, as opposed to a film or a sound piece or something, the viewer gets to decide when they're ready to turn that next page for whatever the topic is. They're ready to come
Mm,
back to it when they want. But also, the other side of making books and liking books is we also have this kind of blessing and curse that like we make commodities. We make an object that there is already a decided industry for, that there is a market for. And so because of that, I think that publishers need to think about economics and money as part of the medium in a way that I think a lot of other art doesn't have to. Because
mm.
also, when I make 200 books, I'm buying thousands and thousands of sheets of paper that I don't want to throw away. And
Right,
so,
right.
also because of like the extractive and like wasteful nature of what we're making, I think it's also really important to make sure that we're really intentional about what we're printing, what I'm publishing, if it's going to sell, if it even
Mm,
needs to exist.
mm,
So there's also a lot of that sort of stuff that I think about a lot
mhm,
with publishing. So
mhm, mhm. I'm curious about your. 'Cause I mentioned in the beginning, so you run this publishing house, but you're also an artist yourself. Can you talk a little bit about? I guess you could choose any direction here. If there's one project that you're currently working on, or yeah, what is your art practice like these days?
I mean, that's a really funny question that I don't even know the answer to because similar to how like sure I just said all those things about needing to like be aware of the market and the industry. And so yes, I run a business as an artist, but I don't necessarily think of National Minute Press as a business. It's all part of my like larger business of being an artist. And
Mm,
so
okay.
that line between what is my practice, what is publishing work with other artists is really a blurry thing for me. And especially this year, this year is a really like funny kind of microcosm of all that, I think, where most of this year, publishing wise, is dedicated to this project that I came up with last year when I learned a little more about photo book publishing world and how it's a kind of wild and potentially predatory world. But
Ooh,
also the fact that there isn't a lot of photo in Rezo, like I had mentioned earlier. So this
yeah.
project I'm working on is I'm publishing 12 photo books with 12 different photographers.
Ooh, that's
Um,
exciting.
Sarah Winston, who was on a few episodes ago,
Yeah,
is one
yeah.
of those artists. She's really kind of one of my closest collaborators at the moment on things. And so that putting out 12 books with 12 different artists takes up a lot of time, especially
Yeah.
on top of teaching and on top of the other books that I'm putting out within the process of things.
What's your timeline for those 12 photo books?
Those are all really fast compared to what I had mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Of some of those are happening within weeks.
Wow.
but with that, a lot of it's the really the reference for that project is it's all one color books. So it's basically all like black and white photo books that
Mhm.
are supposed to be somewhat experimental in nature. So there have been some people that had some things sitting in the background. So something like Sarah's book was a bunch of photos that she took in 2010 at her family's farm in North Dakota. And these things she'd been sitting on for quite a while.
Mhm.
Similarly, an artist, Ebti, she had all these photos of her family's tailor shop in Cairo that she took in 2019 when her uncle died. And even in the moment she took them, she knew that this was probably going to be the last time she would ever be in this tailor shop that had
Oh, wow.
sustained her family for several generations. Um, and so she took all these photos that don't look anything like what her regular practice looks like, and she sat on them. And so that was one of these books.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
and so some of them have been kind of opportunities for exploring that, where then one of the newest books that's coming out in July is with a photographer named Nicole White, who just bought a house in the Bay Area. And buying a house in the Bay Area, if you are not extremely wealthy, is kind of this like Pandora's box of torture. And so
Mm.
her book is all of this kind of disasters she's found as they've been like getting the house ready to move in. And so that's a book that like it's about 6 months worth of photos that we're now putting
Yeah.
together. So they kind of come and go.
Yeah,
Uh,
it seems like all of those that you mentioned in some way anyway deal with this idea of nostalgia, which I think is interesting considering that you said they're all published in one color, black and white. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
What kind of printer are you using for these? I assume not the Riso.
But no, everything's Riso.
It is.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And so
Wow.
they're all printed, they're all one color, but they're all still like that spot color, like I mentioned.
Okay,
So
okay, okay.
like the like Sarah's book was all printed in this color brick that is this like dark earthy red.
Very cool.
Ebti's book is all printed in turquoise. And so they're basically black and white photos because the way the printer works,
Hmm.
it translates a black and white image into whatever color you put there. It's
The drum
just
is sure, sure,
red and
sure.
white, not black and
Very,
white.
very
Yeah.
cool. So I wanted to ask you, you mentioned something and I forget how you phrased it about the photo book industry. It was something pretty bleak that you said. I don't remember what word you used.
Well, 'cause I was holding back my like normal swearing outburst about when I because since sure I take a lot of photo work or a lot of my personal work starts as photographs, but I don't
Okay.
necessarily consider myself a photographer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and actually doing this, part of why I did this project was to try to figure out a little more of like why I feel that way. And I
Mm-hmm.
have definitely learned it's because I'm not broken the same way photographers are broken. Um, I have my brain's broken in a completely different way. And I'm just not, it turns out I'm actually not at all interested in the same questions that photographers are. And so it's been nice to like be affirmed by that. Um, it doesn't help me understand what the heck it is I make, but it helps me know what I'm not making. And so yeah, but in this whole process, as like especially with Sarah, with a lot of like other photographer friends that I'm working with, learning how much a really significant portion of the photo book industry is pay to play. And so like you go to a company and you give them $30,000 so they make your monograph. And
Mm.
just within that world that's known, you need to make like it, once you make this book, you'll be taken more seriously by galleries or what have you, which is so incredibly different from the world of art publishing that I'm in, where I pay for everything up front for every book that we put out. Once I recoup costs, we split all of our profits 50, like 50
Ah,
50. Like again, it's very
okay.
like punk rock, like
Got
independent
it.
label, like mindset. And that is how most people I know in the type of art publishing I'm in work, is that it is very much a like, yeah, nobody's getting rich, but also like we are all making a couple $1,000s.
That's great.
Which is great. Like, that's more
That's
than you can
great.
pay for most art.
Art. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
like,
Totally.
which is like the perk of like when you have a $40 book, you can sell 100 of them because
Hmm.
100 people can afford a $40 book.
Totally.
Um, as opposed
Wow.
to how many people can afford that $4,000 painting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah.
Do you do calls for art or calls for artists, or are you too busy for something like this?
I don't at the moment, partly yeah, because I am very, very lucky that I'm way too busy.
That's awesome.
Um yeah.
That's awesome.
Because yeah, on top of those 12 books that I'm publishing this year that I already mentioned, I also have published three other books outside of that series and have four more that I'm supposed to finish before I leave the country for the rest of the year in October. Um, and I'm curating this show that I've spent the last like 2 years working on that's going to open in a month.
Oh,
Um,
where is that? Maybe this could be our kind of closing question. So,
um, yeah,
yeah.
so I have been working on this show with my studio mate Amy
Okay.
called Unfolding Duplications: Contemporary Risograph Publishing. And it'll be at the San Francisco Center for the Book, opening July 19th and then running through mid-September. I don't know the actual closing date off the top of my head, unfortunately.
We could plug it in later. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's essentially kind of a contemporary survey of what is happening in risograph publishing within North America with a slightly Western bias, I'll admit.
Hmm.
And Western part of the country, not like culturally Western, just
Yeah.
to
Yeah. I got it.
we're anti-East Coast. No, but yeah, so it includes work from zines, comics, to some like Julie Chen, like one of the most important active fine press book artists in the world. Um, she has started working in Rezo. So, this like thousands of dollars, lots of all handmade, really small edition book.
Wow.
That's also in the show right next to, yeah, $10 comics.
That's awesome.
And so
And
really
all
trying
the
to
work is for sale at this show?
all of the none of it since it's the center isn't a selling institution,
Hmm.
the center for the book. But we did make a point that all of the work that is in the show is still in print. So
Oh,
all
that's
of the
great.
work is acquirable, although not actually at the show.
Excellent, excellent. So that is opening in July, end of
July
July,
19th,
July
which happens
19th.
to coincide with the Friday of the San Francisco Art Book Fair, which runs July
Perfect.
18th through 21st. One of the best book fairs in the country.
Perfect. So I'll
Honestly,
make
worth
sure that
traveling.
this airs before then so that we can encourage listeners to go and show up and support. And listeners, if you're not in California or on the West Coast or in the Bay Area, you still have the ability to support online. So I will include links to all the things, and yeah, support. It's like the same as a cup of coffee, except better.
Yeah, I've got a Patreon. I never talk about it. I can't even believe I just brought it up. Wow. Um,
Yeah. We'll link to that too. We'll link to all the things. Zach, thank you so much for your
Thank
work and
you.
for chatting with us today. It was an
Of
honor.
course. I hope it made sense.
Thanks again for tuning in, everyone. My guest this week was Zach Clark, artist, educator, and founder of National Monument Press, a publishing house focused on small edition artist books, zines, and printed matter. Please be sure to tune in next week as I will be speaking with Juan Carlos Escobedo, whose work explores his identity as a queer, brown Mexican American raised in a low socioeconomic community along the U.S.-Mexico border. His work addresses residual class and race shame that arises from living in a predominantly white, structured United States, which favors light-skinned individuals and middle class and above socioeconomic classes. Hope to see y'all then. Have a safe week. Bye-bye.